Welcome to the King of the Court podcast with Ben Riggs and Ben Staten.
All right, welcome to the King of the Court podcast. I'm Ben Riggs. This is Ben Staten.
Yo.
Man, I was down in New Orleans last night for the Mavericks-Pelicans game. Ultimately, at the end of the day, my primary allegiances lie with the Mavericks. I'm born and raised in Louisiana, but the team I want to see win most is the Mavericks. And last night, it was tough for different reasons. First of all, I want to give a shout out before because I'm about to shit hard on the refs. But before I get into the negativity, I want to give a shout out. But before that game started, I text you. I was looking at the injury report because I was bringing my son, who's 10, and his friend, who's 10, down to the game. And once a year with our ticket package, we get to go courtside during warm-ups and stuff like that. But I was texting, and this was that game. And so I was texting you before the game, looking at the injury reports. Luka, Kyrie, Derek Lively out. Zion, B.I. for the Pelicans out. And it was just sort of like, I don't even know why I'm paying for this. I'm watching two bench units squabble. But I really, really, really want to give a shout-out to all the players on both teams, especially Dwight Powell and Daniel Gafford. Two of the nicest dudes ever. Quentin Grimes as well. Quentin Grimes came over, talked to my son and his friend, signed autograph, took pictures. Just a super nice dude. Daniel Gafford and Dwight Powell came and got my son and brought him out on the court and let him throw alley-oops to them. And they made it like super fun for him. It was just a really cool moment. Jose Alvarado came over, dapped him up, and DeJounte Murray took pictures with him. It was just a really, really, really cool fan experience for them. One of the things the NBA does so well is engaging with young fans. I was not in LA for the game last night, but you saw the really cool moment with LeBron James and that little girl. But I really want to give a shout out to those guys. I know they do that kind of thing every night. A lot of the times it goes unnoticed and unmentioned, but it means the world to them. So if by chance Daniel Gafford and Dwight Powell end up watching this podcast, as a dad, thank you. But like from those two kids, the whole night they were saying this is the best night of our lives. Started out being, why the hell am I paying for this? Ended up being the best night of our lives. So I really want to give a shout out to those guys. That was an awesome thing.
Yeah, it's such a small thing for them to do, but like that's a memory your kid's gonna have for the remainder of his life.
Yes.
Like, yeah, he will tell his kids about it. That's gonna be like burned into his memory.
But look, that's enough of the positivity. It's time to get down to brass tacks. This is another thing that sort of blew my expectations. This was a really fantastic game, back and forth throughout. Lead changes, tight at the half, tight at the end, down the stretch, really elite shot making. DeJounte Murray was really good in this game, particularly in the clutch time. Klay Thompson hit some really big buckets in clutch. And then it just kind of was a game that got screwed up by the refs. Dallas gets a turnover inside of about 6 seconds, pushes it up the court inside of 5 seconds. Dinwiddie gets an open look at a layup, goes up with it, puts it off the glass. Anybody who's watched Dinwiddie, and he pointed this out in the post-game press conference, this is how he does contested layups, and he's successful at it. He has some length, and he puts his hand right up there at the glass, uses his other hand and the angle of his body to shield the defender to make it to where the only way they're going to get this ball is by goaltending. And his strategy worked perfectly, minus one thing. The refs completely blew the call. That ball clearly bounces off the glass inside of 5 seconds. Mavs down 1. And they just completely missed it. I mean, for our viewers at home, I'll play the clip right here. It could not be more obvious. It goes off the glass. You hear the announcer saying it hit the board first. It was obvious to everyone in the arena. funny. The NBA, post the highlight on their official account. Eventually had to delete the highlight, which gave Trey Murphy credit for a game-saving block because it got community noted as being a goaltend. And eventually the NBA just has to come in and delete the post. So this is an instance in which the Dallas Mavericks and the New Orleans Pelicans were in a hotly contested game throughout the entire game, gave us a great product, gave everybody exactly what they paid for. Guys who had to step up because stars were out played extremely well. Daniel Gafford, Jaden Hardy had great games. And the NBA refs just completely screwed up the final result.
Yeah. I mean, like, what was the time on the clock when that play happened?
It was inside of 5 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, this is.
And neither team had a timeout after that.
Yeah. And look, no one's accusing anyone of, some type of conspiracy or there was anything like that. This was
absolutely not. It's incompetence.
They made an error. They made a mistake. I mean, if you watch the clip, it's not like, so sometimes you have goaltending calls which are like basically, hit or miss and right there, but you can see the ball bounce, like not just hit the thing, it bounces off. Like it's just a bad call. And the problem with that is, like this, this will happen over the course of the season, but this literally swung the game. This one call swung the game on its own, probably. And it's a real shame that there's no measure in place for, say, the review office, whatever, at league headquarters to be able to send like an alert or like something like they do in soccer.
Well, even
VAR,
on
which
the
is like,
court,
hey boss, you should look at this. Yeah,
even on the court, because like think about this: if in that same moment, let's say the Pelicans are down, or let's say the Mavericks are down 2. Instead of a layup, they kick it out to Spencer Dinwiddie in the corner, and he shoots a 3. But his foot was on the line. They would review that.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. Like, during the course of a game, like they will let play continue at a shot that was at the buzzer. And if it's made and they're not sure, they'll just count it, and then it'll be reviewed, and they'll take the points off if it doesn't count. Or if someone stepped out of bounds and they didn't realize it, or if there was a 3-pointer that gets converted into a 2-pointer because the foot was on the line, that will be reviewed over the course of the game. And those plays, like if they can do that earlier in the game, why is the fact that the game is ending, which means that this play matters more than those plays did previously? This is the game-deciding play. Why isn't that reviewable? Like why can't they take a break there and stop? Everyone would be okay with that. Like, especially you can let the play
get it right 100%.
You can let the play continue and like wait for like the Dallas Mavericks to commit their intentional foul afterwards, and then say, hold up, we're just gonna wait a second here, and we're gonna get the okay from league office to see there wasn't a goaltend, and and then if it's a goaltend, you call that back and you count the basket and you give the ball to New Orleans on the out of bounds and continue. Like this is the replay debate. That I'm not one who wants 17 challenges. This slows the game down. But in situations like this, you got to get it right, and you got to have some type of review mechanism that allows you to get it right. And it's a shame because you have a team specifically in Dallas which needs do they have any healthy players? I think it's like Klay Thompson is the only starter, I believe, who's played consistently throughout the year. Everyone else, now Lively's out, Luka's out, Kyrie's back, but he's got, what is it, a bulging disc? Like this is like taking this win away from them matters a lot. Like it could have significant implications over the course of the year.
I think that they moved 2 or 3 spots in the standings last night due to the ref's missed call. And so with that said, look, I think there's obviously a process in place to protest the game. The threshold for being able to, protest and have that protest sustained is pretty high, almost insurmountably high.
Let's just explain the last time a protest was successful was in 2007. And I don't know if people remember this. Shaquille O'Neal was on the Heat at the time. and it was a close game. And O'Neal picked up his fifth foul, and the refs thought it was a sixth, so they disqualified him from the game. And it was overturned because there was ref error, significant ref error that impacted the rest of the game. And what the NBA ruled at the time,
And specifically, it's the misapplication of rules.
misapplication of rules. Specifically, what they ruled at the time is they were just going to replay the remaining like 5 or 6 minutes. Now, like, it got kind of amusing because the Heat traded O'Neal in the interim, and so when they replayed the game, O'Neal wasn't part of the. O'Neal couldn't play on the court anyways because he was no longer on the Miami Heat. But they, like that was, that was their justification. Is like they're so I'm sure there will be a grievance. There will be a protest. I don't know if it will be sustainable. Like this is a different situation. Like this is. It's clearly a missed call, but it's a different situation than just
It's not a misapplication of the rules in I guess an explicit sense. I mean, it's a misapplication of the rules in that the rules state you are not allowed to block a shot after it's come off the backboard. And
a missed call is different than a misapplication of the rules.
Yes.
It's a very different situation.
Yes. And so I would be surprised. Now, with that said, if the protest was sustained, what you would have is the next time the Pelicans and the Mavericks play. I hadn't even looked at the schedule to see when that would be. But the next time that they would play out the remaining 5 seconds of that game with Dallas up 1, and I believe New Orleans would have no timeouts. If I'm a Mavericks fan, I would not hold my breath for that. And it's a process that you cannot control. So I think it's kind of more beneficial.
NBA does not want precedent of teams being able to go for and basically comb clips of the games and say, there was a missed call here. We want you to overturn. They don't.
No, I don't disagree with you about that, but I do think like this is one of those situations too where like usually missed calls, hysteria around missed calls is reserved for the fan base that feels aggrieved. This is one of those things where it was so bad that it kind of spread into just like NBA Twitter in general. And I tend to agree with you. We're the chances of us seeing them replay the final 5 seconds with the Mavs up 1, and Pelicans inbounding after a made basket with no timeouts, seems highly unlikely to me. With that said, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but man, I've got to be honest with you. The officiating this year has been atrocious to me.
Yeah.
And it's not just missed calls like this. It's missed calls that seem far less consequential within the course of a game that granted, they're not final play, game deciding plays that are missed, but the accumulation of those missed calls, like if it's a player driving to the basket and their forearms are getting slapped or grabbed and it's just not called, like the consequence of that isn't just like a team is unable to get a basket or they don't get to the free throw line. It's also that like you just end up with a sloppier looking product. It's just bad basketball. Like it's frustrating to watch it, even if it's the Brooklyn Nets versus the Toronto Raptors. And Jesus Christ, man, like that score in that Brooklyn Nets game last night with the Clippers that's embarrassing.
Did they cross 50 points? Did they?
Yes, God bless. I mean, that was a ass whooping if there ever was one. But I've just been really, really, really disappointed in the officiating this year. And to be honest with you, like I think that it's a smaller part of the reason why you might see viewers a little less engaged in the NBA, but certainly drives to the basket where people are getting hacked and the ball's flying out of bounds and there's no call and it just looks like an incompetent ball handler driving to the rim and losing the ball like he's a 12-year-old. Like that kind of thing to me makes for just a less exciting, less intriguing product, and the NBA really needs to clean this up.
The bigger problem than just missed calls, because missed calls do happen. They especially when they happen late in games, they're particularly They're particularly annoying, and they cause a lot of pain to fans and to players. But there's no consistency this year. There was a lot. The NBA got lauded last year for in the second half of the season allowing more physicality, and one of the things they also did was that it was consistent. Games across the league were being officiated similarly. Like that was why we were able to pick it up. It wasn't just like we got officiating crews this year doing wildly divergent things. Some crews will allow a lot of contact. Some crews will allow no contact. Some crews will allow contact in the post, and but no contact on the perimeter. Some crews will allow contact in the perimeter and no contact in the post. It's like an umpire
Think
with an
about the
inconsistent strike
difference.
zone.
Think about the difference between that OKC Thunder Dallas game and how physical they were with Luka, and think about the OKC Milwaukee game. Those two games were reffed entirely differently.
Entirely different. And but additionally, you've had some games where they allow a lot of physicality. You have other games where they've had 80 free throws.
Yeah.
Like, you should never have a basketball game with 80 free throws. That is insane. That means that somewhere around 50 to 60 fouls were called because you have to get in the bonus.
Yeah.
And we need consistency. I don't understand why. There was universal acclaim at the end of last year about the league allowing more physicality. I think they found the right balance and the right formula where you don't want to go back to times where people are just clubbing each other and fist fighting on the court. That's stupid. But it is important to allow players to be able to be physical. And the other thing that needs to be addressed is right now, offensive players are allowed to be more physical than defenders. Offensive players around the league, and this is particularly prominent with the best teams. The offensive players are using their off arm to just throw the defender away from them, just shove them away. It's a consistent thing that's happening, and if the defender does anything to try to stand up to that, like even if he tries to resist, that will be called a foul on the defender. This is an epidemic that is really harming the product. It's bad to watch. It prevents the defender from being able to play defense. Because it not only affects that specific play, but the defender knows he can't do anything about it. So he's going to get, contact shy and bashful about trying to defend the shot. The other thing that they're allowed doing is players are doing, it's a hardened move. Like they'll get their arm, they'll hook the defender's arm when he's just based like this, and they'll jump through it. The defender's done nothing wrong. He's allowed to occupy the space that he has beforehand. And the offensive player is hooking the arm, moving it up, and creating the contact. That's a play that you should be able to catch. That is against the rules. That is an offensive foul by NBA rules, and that is not called.
And I agree. Look, the only reason I brought up the officiating, I agree with the principle that you can't complain about the refs if you're not knocking down your jump shots. But that was not the case last night. Both teams played well, especially considering that they were both missing their two best scorers. So this was an instance in which the NBA affected the product in a negative way with poor officiating. Now, with that said, if the Mavericks are looking for factors that they can control, here are some things I would point out. First and foremost, before the game even starts, if I'm the Dallas Mavericks, if I'm Jason Kidd, and look, I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who has more consistently defended Jason Kidd than me. But this is a critique I have of Jason Kidd. Kyrie has a bulging disc. I have no idea the severity of the injury, and the severity of a bulging disc can range so dramatically that it can be something that's debilitating, or something that, as you saw the other day, he was out for a week, came back and played an NBA game, and then he took the next game off. And that's sort of where I'm entering the narrative, is took the next game off. Because when you look at the reporting around him taking the next game off, Kyrie Irving said after the previous game, the loss they had the other night to whoever it was, I forgot, to the Nuggets, that he expected to play versus the Pelicans. And reporting on Kyrie Irving said that prior to, I did not see him out there, so it must have been an early warm-up, but it said prior to the Pelicans game, he got a very active warm-up in. So it sounds like what the Mavericks are doing is attempting to manage Kyrie's injury by staggering his games, limiting his, particularly before Luka gets back, the amount of time they have him on the court. So my point would be this. The chances of you beating the Nuggets with just Kyrie and no Luka is less than 50%. The chances of you
25%, let's be very clear. We're not talking like low 40s. We're talking like 20, like that is a good team. It isn't,
it's a good team.
With the best player in the world currently on it.
So like I would not look at that game and think to myself, like, this is the one I want to go all in on whenever I'm going through a really rough injury spurt where I'm going to have limited availability from Kyrie, no availability from Luka, and at least for a short stretch, none from Derek Lively. And so what I would have done if I was Jason Kidd is sat Kyrie for the Nuggets game, gave him an extra day of continued rest by letting him sit on the first day of a back-to-back. And then when the rest of the team is a little down from being on the second day of a back-to-back, I would bring Kyrie back to play against the Pelicans, who are much lower hanging fruit. And with Kyrie on the court, you should be able to pick off a win and sustain your place in the standings. Instead, what happened was Jason Kidd played Kyrie against the Nuggets, lost that game anyway, and then went on and sat Kyrie against the Pelicans and consequently lost that game as well. So instead of coming out of that 2-game stretch 500, you come out of that 2-game stretch with 2 losses. And then reporting suggests that Kyrie is going to return to the Oklahoma City Thunder game. And the chances of the Mavericks beating the Oklahoma City Thunder without Luka, even with Kyrie, once again, is a below 50% proposition. Like, play this.
They have, without Lively in that game, that we're talking like 10% chance. Like this goes back to one of my criticisms of Jason Kidd, which is he can sometimes be, dismissive of the regular season and not take it as seriously enough as I believe he should. This was something that he needed to be tactical about. The team has been suffering through an epidemic of injuries. You need, I know you built up a decent lead. Before that, you had a very good record. You're number 2 in the West, but you knew that Kyrie Irving has an injury he has to manage going forward. You know that it's going to be a while before Luka comes back. You know that you have other players nursing injuries. You know that you've the injury luck for this season been bad, so you probably should assume the worst. You need to be able to be very tactical with every game that you play Kyrie Irving and the rest of the way. It made no sense for him to play that first game, which they were likely to lose, and then not play him in a game which if he had played, the Mavs would have won. They would have won this game. And so instead of, you went 0 for 2 instead of possibly, being able to pull off a 1-of-1, most likely. And now you're going to play him again in the harder matchup against OKC, where, and like with the compound matters, you've lost Lively, who's probably out for the next game as well with a sprained ankle. It's not like, I don't think this is something he's going to make him miss tons of time, but he's probably not coming back into OKC. And, so now you're missing 2 of your best players for the second matchup. It's just you need to treat the regular season seriously. You don't need to win every game, but you do need to accumulate enough wins to be able to avoid serious issues if you have injuries. And if you are suffering through injuries, you need to be very tactical about how you approach the rest, and very tactical and strategic about how you approach the rest of the season. And he did not do that here.
I agree completely. And I think, even with Hartenstein out, I think the Mavs, the reason I say a less than 50% proposition without Luka is with Hartenstein out, and PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, and Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleba. The Thunder just don't have a 7-footer. The rebounding and rim protection could be a problem if the Thunder aren't shooting the 3-point shot well in that game. This could end up being an interesting game, but even if it is, it doesn't change the math behind what we're talking about. Like, it's still percentage-wise easier to beat the Pelicans than it is the Thunder. And so I think you got to take the win where you know you can get it, and just try to tread water and stay within striking distance, by kind of pedaling in the middle of the Western Conference until Luka gets back. With that said, a couple other things I'll note about that game that I thought were strategic errors. I don't remember exactly when it was. It was inside of a minute. I think it's somewhere around like the 36-second mark or somewhere like that. Mavs come out of a timeout, and the play that they draw up. Now, I want to be very clear. I understand wanting to get the ball into Klay Thompson's hands. I think at that point he had made three straight buckets, and the Mavs and DeJounte Murray were trading. It was really just Klay Thompson and DeJounte Murray trading buckets at that point, and Klay Thompson was knocking down some tough shots. So I fully understand wanting to get the ball in Klay Thompson's hands. With that said, no part of me would ever have contemplated the possibility in that timeout of drawing up a play in which we put the ball in Klay Thompson's hands in an ISO, expecting him to just take his defender off the dribble. And
the Klay Thompson point guard experiment. I love that. That was a good one. I did appreciate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we ISO'd Klay Thompson up at the top as though of all the people on that. I mean, quite honestly, if that's what we're looking for is just an ISO shot, I would have much preferred Spencer Dinwiddie, Quentin Grimes, or Jaden Hardy. What I would have liked to have seen in that moment was some off-ball action that was designed to get Klay Thompson a shot.
Do the Peja Stojakovic, just have him run off a bunch of screens. Like if you're going to want to get him involved.
Let's just be very clear. Just do the same damn thing you did the three possessions before, and got Klay Thompson a shot. Why do I think that decision was made? This is the third error that I think happened, and this isn't Jason Kidd's fault, but I think the reason that it happened, and being at the game and sitting near the Mavs bench, I saw the interaction between Spencer Dinwiddie and Jason Kidd as that timeout began. And Spencer Dinwiddie went over complaining to Jason Kidd about something, and Jason Kidd was clearly having none of it. And, I mean, Jason Kidd is rarely animated, and he was not animated in this moment, but you could tell he was very dismissive of whatever Spencer Dinwiddie was saying, and then said something back to Spencer Dinwiddie, which resulted in Dinwiddie, kind of hand-waving at Jason Kidd as he walked away. And I suspect what Jason Kidd said was that wasn't, whatever complaint Dinwiddie filed with the coaching staff as he walked by them at the beginning of the timeout, Jason Kidd probably responded and said, well, Spencer, the problem with that last possession wasn't, and quite frankly, the last couple of possessions wasn't the play we drew up. It was the fact that you just stood there dribbling the ball between your legs for 12 seconds and then, ran the shot clock down before you forced a bad shot. Spencer Dinwiddie had a great game heading into the final seconds of the final minute or so of the game. And as we got, or I'll say final 2 minutes of the game, as we got into the final 2 minutes, we got a little bit too much Dinwiddie ball. And where Dinwiddie is able to impact this team and what I think Jason Kidd wants for him, the reason you're seeing Dinwiddie in those final stretches and he trusts him over Jaden Hardy is for two reasons. One, Jaden Hardy and Spencer Dinwiddie on defense are two completely different animals. Spencer Dinwiddie is a much better defender than Jaden Hardy. Two is Dinwiddie is a better playmaker than Jaden Hardy. Although I do think you can see Hardy making the effort to become a better playmaker in these games. Because I want to give a shout out, some props to Jaden Hardy. He is clearly putting forth the effort to become a real basketball player that is deserving of minutes. He is adjusting his game and trying to become less of just a hero ball player and more of a well-rounded NBA guard. And I think he deserves props for that. I fully understand why in that moment Kidd prefers Dinwiddie to Hardy. But if what I'm going to get from Dinwiddie is just a bunch of dribbling that results in creating a last-second shot, quite honestly, man, I think I'd rather that be Hardy. He's shiftier, he's quicker, and I think he actually has a better off the dribble shot than Spencer Dinwiddie. But that was another problem I noticed down the stretch. And then my final noise that I'll make from my soapbox is I understand the defensive versatility that Maxi Kleber gives you. I understand that Maxi Kleber has been playing a little better of late. It is an understatement to say that Maxi Kleber is hesitant to shoot the basketball.
I mean, he didn't shoot it all yesterday.
He will not shoot it. Like they're and I look, man, I'm to the point now because like I think going into that game, he was 4 of his last 7 from 3, but that like he's shooting it so infrequently that stretches out like over like several games. And there are a bunch of times in this game last night where he's getting the ball and has wide open shots and simply isn't taking them. He's moving the ball and like that's great and everything, but look, man, ball movement is designed to get people open shots. And
this is in fact correct.
Yes, like the reason you move the ball and like I'm all for like, you know, really good ball movement. It swings fast. People are turning down good shots to get great shots. I don't know what you turn down the great shot for. Like I don't know that we have a level above the great shot that we're looking for. And that's where we're at with Maxi Kleber. I am more than open to the idea that if Nico Harrison can do something to upgrade that position before the trade deadline, that not only that he should, that he would. And I will mention there was another Twitter account last night. I can't remember who it was. Mavs Digest, I believe, might have been who posted this. But they talked about, they raised the question of seeing Nico Harrison at the New Orleans game and pointing out him sitting on his phone. I think that we might be drawing some conclusions about just seeing someone on their phone. That could have simply been his wife, you know, calling to ask, you know, where the kids' basketball shoes were or something like that. But with that said, I will say this. Him and David Griffin spent about 30 minutes sitting courtside talking to one another before that game last night. And I know there's been some rumors about some potential trades coming out of New Orleans. I want to be very clear. I do not think Zion Williamson or Brandon Ingram are coming to Dallas. But that I'm not a conspiracy theorist. And so I want to offer what I'm saying with I couldn't hear a single word these guys were saying. They talked for 30 minutes. They could literally just be catching up, right? But it was a very long conversation, and there are some needs that Dallas has as you get into the 7th and 8th man in the rotation, and particularly strategic areas of the rotation that are designed to give you some defensive versatility, i.e. Maxi Kleber's length and ability to guard at the perimeter. Because Maxi Kleber is clearly at a place where he's beyond reticent to shoot the basketball. And I don't know if that's because there's an injury or it's a confidence thing, but at a certain point it doesn't matter because he's passing up great shots to get bad shots.
Yeah, it's an issue. It's been an issue for, dating back to the playoffs last year. It's an issue in the season last year. This does happen to some players. Now, there's a possibility he hurt his shoulder in the playoffs. I don't want to, I'm not going to play amateur doctor and be like, aha, I know what's happened. But that possibly could be something that's happening. There's also what I call the Marc Gasol syndrome, which is as you grow older in your career, you for some reason decide that actually shooting the ball is gauche and you don't do it anymore. The attempts, the fact that he's shooting not even taking shots. And this was the guy who was a 3-and-D player, as everyone knows. Like, he was
his
a
3-point shooting in the first finals run, Western Conference Finals run a few years ago, was absolutely critical.
Yeah, so it is an issue. You can't play 4-on-5 basketball. You just can't. You can't do that in the playoffs. At the highest level. He brings a lot to the team defensively. He does allow the team to be more switchable on defense, but they're going to need him to be able to be aggressive and looking for a shot when it's given to him. He has to do what Josh Hart does. Josh Hart does not like shooting the ball, but if you give him an open 3-point shot, he's going to shoot it
Yeah.
because he knows that if he doesn't shoot it, that actually causes more problems to the offense than him missing it.
Well, and the thing about Maxi Kleba that's strange is that what you're describing with Josh Hart is true to who he is.
Yes.
Like, that's not a new development. Like, Maxi Kleba being reticent to shoot a 3-point shot is a strange thing.
Yes.
Maxi Kleba was a 3-and-D guy. He shoots 3-point shots. All right. With all that stated, yes, there were things that the Mavericks could have done that would have won them that game. I go back to that Clay ISO. That is the most bizarre idea that I've seen Jason Kidd have coming out of a timeout in an end of game situation. And then the Dinwiddie hero ball, all that stuff was problematic. This was a game where, despite all of that, the Mavericks put themselves in a position where they should have been up one inside 5 seconds with no timeouts left for either team, and the Pelicans inbounding the ball after a made basket, which probably means the Mavs have somewhere in the 99% range of winning that game. And the refs robbed them of that. And as we said earlier, it's not just that it impacts a game. The Western Conference is so tight right now, and the Mavericks are suffering from so many injuries that this is one of those things that could, at the end of the season, have playoff implications, seeding implications. And so this is really an egregious loss. But with that said, let's kind of look at the standings and see where this impacts the Mavs. So right now, the Western Conference, sort of that middle pack, is so gobbled up. All right. The Nuggets, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Mavericks, the Timberwolves, and the Kings are all sort of the 4 through 9 seeds, are all in a sort of relatively tight pack. Whereas you could even throw the Grizzlies into that category, to be honest with you. There's 4 games separating them. Less than 4 games separating them and the Kings. And so the 3 and 9 spots are all really tight. So every win, every loss makes a big difference. The Lakers were able to get a win last night. As I mentioned earlier, I don't even know that we can call what the Clippers got a win. They literally beat the ever-living shit out of the Brooklyn Nets. Had to be the least competitive NBA basketball game. The Timberwolves lost to the Golden State Warriors. Late game heroics from Steph. That was fun to watch. So the Lakers...
Both those teams are so bad. I don't want to be rude.
The Timberwolves and the Warriors?
Yes, both those teams are really bad.
The crazy thing about the Warriors, though, that I like is Steph Curry is just such an entertaining player to watch. That, like, last night, like, it was a fun game. So the Lakers coming up, if I had to project their next 5 games, I would say they're going to go 3 out of 5. They've got the Nets, who, if what the Clippers did to them last night is any indication, I think that the Lakers could start me at the point guard position and win that game. Also, an observation I'd make, the Lakers are far better when Austin Reeves is the primary playmaker and LeBron James is playing off of him to score and impact the game rather than the other way around. Their next game after that is sort of going to be, from the Mavs' point of view, the perfect scenario because one of the 2 teams immediately in front of them has to lose in the crosstown matchup between the Lakers and the Clippers. I suspect that the Lakers win the next game against the Wizards. And I suspect that they will lose to the Celtics and then beat the Warriors, although the Warriors is usually a good game with the Lakers. Clippers have a relatively easy schedule, and then the Timberwolves have the Knicks, Cavaliers, Grizzlies, and Mavericks, and then Nuggets. So really the team with the toughest stretch in all of this is the Timberwolves. I don't really see them being able to apply any upward pressure to the Mavericks. They're the team immediately situated behind them. And then the last team I'll note is the Kings. They have the Rockets, Wizards, Warriors, Nuggets, Knicks. I think that Kings Nuggets game and Kings Knicks game should be fun. The Warriors and the Wizards should be wins for the Kings. So I think what you're going to end up seeing is the Mavericks holding around the 6-7 seed. I think you're just going to see teams continue to cannibalize each other in the West. So in terms of like immediate panic or sense of urgency, I'm still not there. The concern I think that the Mavericks fans have to have is Kyrie's injury. Like I had a bulging disc one time, fell out of a chair, literally could not get off the ground, and had to have somebody help me up. It was about 3 days where I couldn't even walk. Took some anti-inflammatories. A couple of days later, was playing sports again. And never really had any significant problems after that. They're clearly managing Kyrie's injury. If it's going to be something that's just popping up for the rest of the year, where he's missing games because of pain and limitations, that's going to be a problem for the Dallas Mavericks.
Yes, and I also think it's important to note that when he talked to the press about his injury, he did mention that he has solicited opinions from other players and specialists specifically regarding whether surgery was necessary. And he said that this, he didn't actually comment on what was told to him, but he said this is an injury that has to be managed pretty aggressively and pretty strategically for the remainder of the year. I think.
But he did say no surgery.
He didn't at least he didn't say that there was a need for surgery. I think he sort of sidestepped what the recommendation specifically to him was. But the bigger issue here for them is that they do kind of have a murderer's row situation coming up. Oklahoma City. They have Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Boston. Oklahoma City, Charlotte, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, Boston, Washington, New Orleans, Detroit, Cleveland, Philly, Boston, Houston, Sacramento, Golden State, Miami. There's a chance that you win, the Charlotte game, the Washington game, and New Orleans, and lose the other 11. That's depending on when Luka comes back. And
he's projected to come back. What they said was early February.
All right, so so that would lead you to the Boston game. So that's so you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games. So you could go 3-8 in that period is probably a realistic expectation, and that gives them a hole to dig out of. They probably fall. In my opinion, they probably fall out. Given that they are, I believe, in 8th place right now, and they have 19 losses, and the team in 11th place and 12th place, the Spurs and the Suns, have 20 losses. They might fall into 11th or 12th place, somewhere around there by the end of this thing. But I think if they can get everyone healthy and they can get people playing consistently, which again is the key word, consistent playing time from all their players right now. But this has been an issue all season. People come back and then someone else immediately gets hurt, and they should be able to dig out from that before the end of the year. But the question we're going to really have to see with the cloud that's now formed over the Mavs organization. If we're looking at this from what we wanted to achieve at the beginning of the year, which was a title, it's the Kyrie question now. Is this something that is just can he manage this and still keep up elite level play, or is this something that's going to affect his play even if he's able to play?
One thing I'll mention in that regard too that I think is interesting. and then I want to circle back to the games they have in front of them before a possible Luka return. But I'll say this: I think Quentin Grimes has firmly established himself as, in the absence of Luka and Kyrie, as the best overall two guard on the team.
Yes.
His play at both ends of the floor, I think, establishes him as the best overall two guard in the absence of Luka and Kyrie. So with that said, it is very interesting to me that Quentin Grimes continues to come off the bench. And I was thinking about this last night on the way home from the game. Like, what are kids' reasons for that?
The most obvious one that comes to mind is kid wants to keep him in the role that he will sees him playing for the full strength version of this team.
There are only two reasons. I think that is the most obvious and most likely. The only other reason I could think of is that he's potentially being considered to be traded.
Yes.
That's the only other. And I think that one thing you could see that would give you some indication about the level of confidence they have about Kyrie's injury. I don't know who, the backup two guard would be that you would bring in that would be a more reliable option for filling in for Kyrie in his absences than Quentin Grimes. Obviously there are people in the league that if you felt like Kyrie was just going to be a no-go and you were actually looking for a starting caliber two guard, there are people out there like that. But I'm talking about like someone who's actually available as a backup two guard that can give you what Quentin Grimes can give you at both ends of the floor. I don't know who that would be. Do you have any ideas?
At the backup level?
Yes.
No, not off the top of my head. I think that I'm not trying to say he's like one of the
No,
top,
I'm not
top,
either. What I'm
top,
no, I mean like at the backup level, Malik Monk, but
yeah,
Malik Monk's not available. Is my point.
no, and their salaries are so different that
Yeah,
it would be a
yeah,
pain to trade for them. And
yeah.
I think he fits perfectly for what they need him to do right now. Now, like
100%.
when you look at the box score, his stat line jumps out particularly is particularly eye popping because he had 14 points in 19 minutes and only got 19 minutes. He got just a couple more minutes than Kleba and played fewer minutes than played literally half the minutes of Dinwiddie played. It's some of that could be that.
Look at Najee Marshall's minutes in production.
Najee Marshall was 30 minutes. He had 7 points, 10 assists, and 2 rebounds.
That's the one that to me, like, maybe you could chalk this up as another strategic error, but like I think giving some of those Najee Marshall minutes to Quentin Grimes changes the outcome of that game as well. Najee had a really, really, really rough, really rough stretch to start the game. He kind of leveled out towards the end. Maybe there was an element of it where it's a homecoming for Najee to New Orleans and Jason Kidd wanted to put him out on the floor. But like, I think you got to forego that kind of stuff in moments like this to just try to get the win.
The other thing about Kidd is that it's pretty easy to tell his rotations if you just combine the minutes to 48 between players. Like Klay Thompson played 26 minutes and Grimes played 19. That adds up to 45. That's pretty clear that they're straight. He's seeing them as a platoon. Same thing with Gafford at 30 minutes, Kleber at 14 and Powell at 4. That's literally 48 minutes.
Gafford had an amazing game.
Yeah, that's literally 48 minutes. You can tell that he used all three of those in the center position. Omax Prosper at 10 minutes, PJ Washington at 38. Like those are clear. They're platooned as well. I think that one of the issues I have with the way the team is managed with by Kidd, and this has been a situation like his mad scientist routine is particularly like it's bemusing to me more than anything. I'm not less frustrated, but like I don't know if people remember in the OKC game in the second half, like the Thunder had blitzed the Mavs. They literally blitzed Luka, getting the ball out of him, and the Mavs had you know they were caught off guard. The intensity hit them, but they went down to half, I think, down by 3. And one of the things that it was like everyone was watching, like, okay, how are the Dallas going to respond? They've seen this. What's going to be their counter? And Kidd was basically when the locker room was like, we need to find someone to be a secondary creator. We have the best dribbler of all time, Kyrie Irving. Are we going to go to him? No, we're going to go to Quentin Grimes. And everyone was like, huh? And so he tested him here as a secondary playmaker, as in that situation. But then in a game like this, where there's not the best perimeter defense in the league facing him, he's clearly unwilling to use him as the secondary playmaker behind Dinwiddie. He gave Dinwiddie 38 minutes in that game, and he played Grimes, specifically as the 2 guard. I think that's a disservice to the team. I think Dinwiddie is too old and not good enough to keep playing 38 minutes a game at this point. He needs I'm not saying play him like 15. I'm saying keep that man at 30 minutes a game. 38 minutes is a lot of minutes for Dinwiddie to be playing. And I think you can take 8 of those minutes and give those to Quentin Grimes, push him up to near 30 as well. And that's going to make the team a lot more, it's going to keep it more fresh. I would like to see Grimes get some, minutes on ball as the primary creator. I think it makes a lot more sense down the stretch than having Klay Thompson randomly run it, run point and generate the offense. But, this is who Kidd is as a coach. If you don't, you can complain all you want about this, but this is like, if you hire Jason Kidd, he's going to do these type of things. He is a tinkerer. He is the kid who's taking apart clocks and rebuilding them just because he finds that interesting. And then you're like, why are all my clocks not working? And you get that, and when it works, what happens is his teams go into the playoffs and outperform expectations, in part because they've lost games in the regular season that they probably should have won because he was tinkering and trying new shit. And so their record going into the playoffs is worse than it should be.
Let me ask you this question too. Yeah. What month do you think Jason Kidd historically tinkers the most in?
My impression with Jason Kidd, which is interesting, is that he tinkers the most at the beginning of the season. Keeps on tinkering until just about the All-Star break. And then once the All-Star break hits, he'll do a little bit of it, but he really wants to find his top, his go-to playoff rotation and sticks with that. That has been my impression with how he does it. Now, like, you saw him tinker a little bit last year at the All-Star break, but that was because they brought in 2 major pieces and we're still trying to figure out how to work with those. But he stuck with once he found his rotation in the home stretch, he stuck with that. He stuck with that for the playoffs as well.
Yeah, so the thing about Jason Kidd that's really interesting, the January record for Jason Kidd, he has 1 January since 2021 where he has a winning record.
Yeah, he's tinkering. He's doing shit.
Yeah. And so, like, on the one hand, I think you, as Mavs fans, can be, frustrated with losing some of these games. At the end of the day, the record for the Mavs in 2025 January is owed less to tinkering and more to injuries.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to imply that he would be winning a bunch of these games right now if he was running a different rotation. No,
to me there's no question that he would win more of them. Yeah. But so in 2021 he was 7-9 in January. 2022 he was 12-4. 2023 6-9. 2024 7-8. I think that, to be quite honest with you, and this kind of, goes back to what we were talking about. We've talked about this a lot with Kidd on this podcast is, what he views the point of the first half of the regular season as. Yes. And, up until this point, I think you can kind of scratch the year they missed the playoffs when they acquired Kyrie at the trade deadline. There was some Yeah, there was some injuries. Those two didn't really have time to gel. They literally got fined by the NBA for tanking. Went and got Derek Lively. From an organizational point of view, I think it was a $500,000 fine. I think that may have been the best $500,000 the Dallas Mavericks have ever spent. But Jason Kidd has a history of landing the plane with this team too. So I'm not going to be overly critical of him. I think that he's has
He
a much
does.
thinner margin of error this year because of the injuries. If
He absolutely has a history of landing the plane. He's made the Western Conference Finals out of the last 3 years. Made the finals last year. It is important to also recognize that his strategy of doing this does have downsides, like any strategy. And one downside is if something that happens like we've seen this year, where there's a rash of injuries, if you have been tinkering around and you have, lost some games you probably should have won, because you were doing some science experiments and trying things that, works, that is all fine and good, and in fact, it has a lot of positives because it can help you identify something that really really works well down the road. But if for some reason there are unforeseen consequences, or it's like when you buy a house and you're going to do a renovation project, it can be really good. It can add a ton of value to the house. You may be able to sell it for a lot more, be able to make a big profit if you're flipping it. But if you go in there and suddenly you find out there's a foundation issue and there's, and the basement floods and all that, you may suddenly realize you have to pay $100,000 you weren't expecting, and now you're going to sell it for a loss. And for this situation, if you get all these injuries and you start losing, you don't have the margin of error you would have had otherwise, and you can find yourself either having to dig out of a deep hole, or you can find yourself in a situation where you may not even make the playoffs, altogether. Now, I think, in general, if the goal is to win a title, his kid strategy is the one I would pursue. I think that it has a lot of value, and I think the Mavs have clearly invested in him and agree with that. Like, everyone's bought in, but
and real quick to just kind of recap what that strategy is, at least from my perspective, I don't think that the strategy was let's strain Luka's calf on Christmas Day. But there is strategy, and then there is playing the hand that you're dealt. And so what Jason Kidd is doing is pursuing a strategy in response to the hand he's been dealt. And so he is without Luka. It is undeniable that Kyrie has an injury of some kind. I do not know what to, I don't know how much concern or severity to ascribe to that injury. I will just assume that if Kyrie Irving is on the court, he feels like he can go, and that they're not overly concerned about him aggravating that injury, especially not right now against a team like the Thunder tomorrow night, where you're most likely not going to win that game. And so if you have any concern about him aggravating that injury, I would just sit him for that game. But what I believe Jason Kidd is doing is I believe he's tinkering. I believe he is figuring out what he's got. I don't know how much there's left for him to figure out. I think he's still wanting to see like how much he can rely on Hardy. I think Luka and Kyrie's absences have enabled Hardy to step up and demonstrate how he's evolved as a player. I've been impressed with him. I also think that the absences of Luka and Kyrie have put players like Dinwiddie and Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall and PJ Washington into more primary roles, which, to be very clear, does have a silver lining as you get into the playoffs, where you're going to have guys who are used to being the guy for the team. And so when Luka creates that open shot for them, they're going to be far more capable of taking advantage of it. And two, it's not going to always have to be Luka creating the open shot for them, because they will be repped, like have gained a lot of game reps and be more more versed at being able to create that shot for themselves. I also think another silver lining that the Mavs will take into the playoffs, as long as the problem doesn't exacerbate itself, is that particularly Luka will be entering the playoffs with far less mileage on his legs than he did last year. And it was noticeable. And to be perfectly clear, I am not saying I thought Luka was out of shape in the playoffs last year. Luka was banged up in the playoffs last year. And I think having minimized some of the wear and tear to Luka during the course of the regular season could have its advantages in the playoffs. So those are the silver linings I think that they're taking with them into the second half of the season, because we have reached that halfway point. That's the silver linings I think they're taking with them into the second half of the season. And ideally, what you're going to see from the Mavs is they're going to get to that early February return date for Luka. And you're going to start to see that starting five that the Mavs have back on the court together. And if everything shakes out well for the Mavericks, what that's going to look like when that happens is they're still going to be hovering around the middle of the Western Conference. All right. So you say, like, how the hell are they going to be hovering around the middle of the Western Conference where over the course of, let's say, the next 10 games, they're going to have to do this without Luka and most likely at times without Kyrie. So tomorrow night they have the Thunder. We both agree that's a loss?
Yes.
All right. Monday they have the Hornets. We both agree that's a win?
If Kyrie plays, yes.
That Wednesday they have the Timberwolves. I would describe that one as a push. Like, I just have to see the game. I don't know who's going to win. If Kyrie plays, and I suspect he will because it's a Monday game against the Hornets, Tuesday off, play Wednesday.
It's an ESPN game. He's going to play.
Yeah. So with Kyrie on the court, I would say that's a push. Just have to see the game, see what happens. Would you agree with that?
I mean, the way Minnesota's playing right now, I think that they have a shot for sure.
Yeah. I mean, on Christmas Day, they had a shot after losing Luka.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that, and to be clear, I think that the supporting cast that they're bringing with them into the rematch against the Timberwolves, it is they're more refined at this point, having played so many minutes and reps together. So if they have Kyrie back on the court, I think, particularly if they have Kyrie and Derek Lively, and they don't suffer any other injuries, I'll just say that's a push and it's competitive. So we have them at 1-1 at this point. The next day, back to back, playing the Thunder.
They're not winning a back to back on the Thunder. That's just not. Yeah.
I agree. And so now we're at 1-2 with the Timberwolves game being undecided. Turn around that Saturday, play the Celtics. We have them at 1-3 now.
Yeah, they're not winning a three games in 5 days versus the Boston Celtics. That's just, I don't see that happening.
Yeah. So they're now at 1-3 with the Timberwolves push. Wizards.
Yes, if they lose to the Wizards, then there needs to be some type of public sacrifice. You know, it can be a small oxen of some sort, if necessary, but you cannot.
Texas Longhorn.
Texas Longhorn. There we go.
Yeah. So we have them at 2-3 after the Wizards game. We've got them into rematch with the Pelicans next. Once again, if Kyrie plays, I think they win that game. I mean, I guess it depends.
$4. I mean, that's like a deal.
Well, I also think it depends on if Zion is playing for the Pelicans in that game. But
if Zion or, I mean, I add up the combined points of people that missed the game yesterday, and it added up to 137 points, which is an impressive amount of points to miss for an NBA basketball game. So, yeah, I think it's just a very, like, at that point, who's playing? Because you never know with the Pelicans. You know, like Zion was out for, I believe, out conditioning. You know, which is, look, man, that's. First off, just mean. Like, why are you? You know, like, I. But it's not a great sign that he's out for conditioning reasons midway through the NBA season. But I'll leave it at that.
2-3, and then with Kyrie, I'll give that game to the Mavericks. That has them at 3-3 with the Timberwolves game being a push. Mavericks Pistons.
Take the
Uh,
Pistons. Pistons are playing really well.
yeah, I would put it as a push if Kyrie's on the floor. But I agree with you. The Pistons are playing really well. Loss to the Cavaliers, which would have them at 3-4 with 2 pushes. Then the 76ers.
I mean that's a game where like who's playing on that team? Like if they have all three of their big three, it's a completely different team. If they're starring Gershon Yabusele, then no, the 76ers are not going to play. But like it's like you basically spin a wheel every game, and you either get like a really really good team or you get the worst team in the NBA. It's
No, I mean I follow you, but at 15-24, I'm going to go ahead and chalk that one up as a Mavericks win. Um,
You are eternally optimistic. Okay. But yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, like, yeah, I don't. I mean, with the 76ers, I mean, we're. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I understand the point that you're saying, but like, I mean, I'm just looking through the last game they won was a 109-103 game against the Wizards. Um,
Oh no, the Sixers are a hot mess. They
yeah,
are
The
they
Sixers are
are a
bad.
complete hot mess. They um it's actually impressive how bad they are, but they do have talent when they are healthy. The question is, are they going to be healthy?
So, I mean, they have talent when they're healthy, but you've also seen them lose games when they're healthy.
Oh
Like,
yes.
there's just no chemistry with that bunch. Joel Embiid, you know, looks like a shell of himself at times. Um, so, I mean, going through the Sixers game, which would be February 4th, you have them being 1-1, 2-1, 3-1, 3-2, 3-3, 4-3, 4-4, with 2 push games.
Yeah.
So in my mind, for Jason Kidd and the Mavericks, you've got to win the games you're supposed to win, and then you've got to win the push games. And then if you're managing injuries to players like Kyrie, you have to say to hell with these games against the Thunder and the Celtics.
Yeah. I think it's important also to remember that that's I'm a little less bullish. I have them at 3-7 in that 10 game streak, but after that they got Boston, Houston, Sacramento, Golden State, Miami. Like they're like it's like even if Luka comes back, that's kind of a murderer's row of opponents for them to face. So it's just as much as anything, it's the shittiest stretch possible for them to suffer all these injuries because they are facing a meat of the season where they're having really good opponents. Now, I would expect, I haven't looked at their schedule down the line, but I would expect that would also mean that they're going to end the season against a pretty easy schedule after that. And they do, they don't I mean but no, actually, they have a tough schedule even at that point. But once they get the team healthy, they're good enough to even beat good teams like that. That's the good thing that we're dealing with.
Oh, 100%. Oh, and I also think that you'll see a higher level of intensity as you head into and out of the All-Star break from,
Yeah,
I mean, really all teams, but I think
yeah.
particularly the
But
Mavs. So that's the reason I'm not panicking because I think that in addition to the Mavs being able to tread water, I mean, and look, I hear what you're saying, um, but with Kyrie and the rest of the team fully healthy, and I understand what it looked like the other night against the Nuggets. I'll chalk that one up a little bit. I don't think they were going to win it either way. I think it's a particularly bad matchup without Luka. But Kyrie coming back from injury, I'll chalk some of that up to some rust because, Kyrie is still Kyrie, and Kyrie did not look like Kyrie in that game. And that was basically what he said after the game, which was, been out with an injury for over a week, came back, looked like I'd been out for injury for over a week. But prior to that, the team with just Kyrie and no Luka was still very competitive.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not I hear what you're saying about me being optimistic. I also think there's just their record backs up being able to say they're going to beat teams like Detroit with Kyrie. Do I think Detroit can beat them? Yes. Do I think that Minnesota can beat them? Yes. That's why I put those two games as push games. But, like the 76ers, if Kyrie's on the floor, I'm not going to go look to bet on this game, but if Kyrie was on the floor and I had to bet, I would bet on the Mavericks in that game.
Yes, I think again the bottom line I think is even assuming the worst case scenario, which is probably closer to my 3-7 than anything else, I think they can scrounge out some wins here and there. I don't think that alone makes digs them so deep of a hole that they can't climb out of it if they get healthy before the end of the season. I think it's not like they're that's you go 4 game, you basically have a net loss of 4 games, over that course of 10 games, which is a lot, but that's not going to put them out of contention. Like it doesn't put them so far back that they can't realistically get back and get back out of even the play, and they can probably get back to the 4th seed or even or even potentially higher depending on health of other teams. So like if we're looking for a silver lining in the injury bug, it happened early enough that and with enough time remaining in the season, that they're not going to be completely basically overwhelmed by it. But I think that there are always positives, especially if you're able to see player development during these periods. Players do get more reps. I think for Hardy in particular, this is an important stretch. This is probably the most consistent minutes he's gotten in his career in terms of just consistently playing a lot of NBA minutes. He's showing flashes. I think that it's good for the veterans to get good minutes running this because they can come in and be helpful in spots in the playoffs. So this isn't a doom and gloom situation for them. They do need to get healthy. They do a lot of this is banking on Luka not only getting healthy but coming back and hitting the ground running. It would there would be more problems if Luka then took a 10 game stretch to get himself back into to back in the ground. He's gonna have to hit the ground running, and I expect him to do that. That's typically been the case when he's getting hurt. Is he comes back really strong, and obviously we're assuming that Kyrie this injury, even if it needs to be managed, is not going to it's not going to reduce him to 80% for the rest of the season. But again, look, if Luka misses an extra month that longer than this, there's a setback like this. We're at that point the season's it's kind of over. At that point, it's out of your hands. If Luka ends up getting a setback and doing a Zion Williamson and he's just out for 3 more longer months than people expect. At that point you have to have a different discussion about this probably isn't going to happen this year. It just wasn't meant to be. But we're not there yet, and it does seem like, at least from just looking at Luka and the way he's walking when you see him on the clips on camera, he does seem to be doing better. It does he's not being wheeled around in a little scooter anymore. So I have no reason to believe there's going to be a setback of any kind.
Yeah, I mean, my thing too, and I'll end on this, is to say outside of the Nuggets, and it's really just because they're anchored by Nikola Jokic, I still have serious concerns about everything around him and its ability to consistently perform throughout the playoffs. But their position in the standings heading into the playoffs, I think it's pretty safe to have them locked in kind of to the top 4.
Yeah.
I do not feel that way about the Rockets, the Grizzlies, the Clippers, the Lakers, the Timberwolves, or the Kings. I think the Rockets are, huh?
You don't feel that way about the Grizzlies?
No, not at all. I think like my thing with the Grizzlies, I was actually talking to the guy at the game last night about this. My thing with the Grizzlies is like, do I think the Grizzlies can win games? Yes. Uh, and like, well, let me reframe my question, or clarify my answer to you. Do I think the Grizzlies are going to be in the top four?
Yeah.
Most likely. Really, the 2 seed to me comes down to this, and I'll put it to you this way: how much do you believe in Jalen Green?
No, I wouldn't bet money on him. Put it that way.
To me, like having Houston in the 2-3 seed is heavily contingent upon Jalen Green continuing to play the way that he has been over the last 7 games. If Jalen Green continues to play the way that he's been playing over the last 7 games, they're going to be the 2 seed in the Western Conference.
Oh yes, I agree. Like the issue with Jalen Green isn't how good he is when he's playing well. It's that he's not consistently playing well, and when he doesn't play well, it's like a complete pendulum swing to the other side, and it's rough to watch.
Yeah. So like I just when we start looking at the second half of the season and the Mavericks are, fielding what I believe is the best starting 5 in the Western Conference. Like I think they're more than capable of making up that ground, and winning at a clip that will vault them back into the top 4. And I'll go as far as to say, I don't have any problem believing that the 2 seed's still within their reach.
I mean, what's the record? We're talking about the 2 seed right now. Let's pull that.
They're 6 games ahead of the Mavericks.
Yeah, 10 games. Like let's say they're able, like if it's like 8 or 10 games and they have 30 games left, that's probably a little hard for them to make up. But it's not like completely out of the realm, especially if um like it would require the Mavs doing something like 25-5 and the other team's going 500 during that stretch, basically. But that's not without out of the realm of possibility.
No. All right, man. Well, I think that's sort of good recap of last night with the Mavericks getting screwed out of a game by the refs and what the implications will be of that for the rest of the season. Really looking forward to the return of Luka. Really want to see Kyrie back out there at full strength. And once again, as my parting comment, if you're a Mavs fan, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. You've seen this from the Mavs, not just before, but virtually every year,
Yep.
where they struggle through January, come out in the All-Star break, close the distance. Jason Kidd lands the plane. He's been to the Western Conference Finals 2 of the last 3 years, made a finals run last year. This is the deepest and best team he's had. The only way he's not going to land this plane is if you're just seeing continued injury problems that are insurmountable all the way into the playoffs. So, with that, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast on YouTube. We really have enjoyed building this audience and talking about basketball with you, and look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good one.
Peace.